Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Evanston's City Manager Recruitment and Selection Process Community Forum. And we really appreciate all of you attending and being with us here tonight to meet the candidates for the Evanston City Manager position. My name is Heidi Voorhees. I'm president of GovHR. Our recruiting firm is working with the city on the recruitment and selection process. And I'm joined here this evening by my colleague, Dele Lohman-Smith, who's a vice president with GovHR, joining us from Atlanta. And Dele will talk in a minute about the timing of what we're doing tonight, but before that, we wanted to talk about the questioning process. And we thank all of you who submitted questions. More than 40 questions were submitted for the candidates, and we did find significant overlap in some areas. So we've tried to focus on the areas that were the most, where we had the most questions asked. For example, we had 12 questions sent in on racial equity. So obviously that's going to be a question that we'll have. So what we are going to do is work through the questions. We will start with a candidate overview. And one thing that we did want to say is that we aren't going to have any candidate specific questions. Some people sent in candidates for individual or questions for individual candidates. We are focusing more on questions that all three candidates can answer. All of the questions that were sent in will be shared with the mayor and city council. So if they want to follow up on those with the candidates in their individual interviews, they will be able to do that. So I'm going to pass this over to Dele, who will talk about our timing and how that will work.
Thanks, Heidi. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to our candidates for being here to participate. As Heidi mentioned, we will time each of the questions. The candidates will start out with an opening statement, and they'll get about 5 minutes to do that. And then for each of the questions that we received from you all, they'll get 3 minutes, and they'll have a closing statement at the end. I'll be timing each of those, and once we get to about 30 seconds, the candidates know that I'll interject and let them know they have 30 seconds left, and we'll move on to the next person.
So in order to determine the order for the candidates, we did a lottery and drew names for who would go first on the opening statements. And then we have alternated on who goes first on the subsequent questions as well as on the closing statement. So by lottery, the first opening statement of 5 minutes on an overview of your background and why you want to be Evanston's next city manager is Marie Peoples.
Hi, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. So I am Marie Peoples, and I am honored to be considered as a candidate for the next city manager for Evanston. I'd certainly like to thank everybody, all the community participants that are in attendance, as well as GovHR. Thank you for your help with this, and the City of Evanston staff, and of course, Mayor and Council. I'd also like to recognize Ms. Farrell and Ms. Storley. I am certainly in good company this evening, and it's amazing to me that we have 3 women as finalists. That to me says a lot about where local government has come and how far we are. So anyway, best to my partners here on screen with me. I currently serve as Deputy County Manager for Coconino County. I've been in that role for about 2 years. I'm also currently serving as the Incident Commander for the county's COVID response, and I've done that since the beginning of COVID. I'm incredibly proud of having been entrusted with that. My community has been very forward-leaning in the pandemic response. We were the first in our state to establish drive-through testing free of charge, operate it 7 days a week, and to establish housing for unsheltered populations impacted by COVID and operate a call center. And again, I've been charged with doing that since the beginning of March, and I think that speaks to my credibility and my ability to make decisive decisions in times of need. Prior to serving as Deputy County Manager, I've been with my county for a total of 7 years. I have served as a department head, for the health district, and I was very proud to do that as well. I'm originally from Missouri and began my career in corrections. I've worked in several Missouri prisons. I've also held several leadership positions within local and state governments. Local government is my calling. It is where I have found my home, and so I'm really looking forward to continuing that service. Regardless of the position that I have held, being involved in community and investing in community has always been at the core of who I am. As an example of that, in Missouri, I served for several years on a very large K-12 and vocational school board. And in Arizona, in my current community, I also serve as an elected member of a community college governing board. For me, community is a hallmark, education is a hallmark of any community, particularly having quality and accessible education. And so I feel as being a community member and resident, it's also my civic responsibility to give back. And I'm really proud of being able to do that. As brief background on Coconino County, it's the second largest geographically sized county in the nation, comprised of over 18,000 square miles of both rural and urban lands. The landmass presents many opportunities and challenges for delivering services. And the services have to meet the unique needs of each community, which is something that I also feel that I'm very adept at and skilled at trying to do to meet certain specific community needs. I live in Flagstaff, which is the county seat, and like Evanston, my community is comprised of people of all different races, religions, backgrounds, and differences of opinions, and it's just a melting pot. Also, like Evanston, my community has about 75,000 residents, and we're also home to several natural wonders, such as the Grand Canyon. So while we only have about 75,000 people, we're home to 6 to 8 million tourists, or not home, but we certainly like to be home as they're traveling. That brings many unique challenges and opportunities as well as we try to meet infrastructure, public safety, and health needs for all of those tourists. Flagstaff is also one of the few places in Arizona that enjoys over 100 inches of snowfall per year. So we're also a ski and snowplay destination. So Evanston's heavy winters will not be a new thing for me. I'm quite used to the snow. Also, like Evanston, my community is home to a very large university, which comes with many pros and cons and community navigations as we work through that together as community. As great as my community is, we also grapple with difficulties such as poverty, social justice issues, economic development, and affordable housing. I believe my experiences with those challenges are relevant to Evanston's needs. And as a leader, I am inclusive, visionary, and innovative, and I have a proven track record of working collaboratively with all partners and stakeholders. If given the opportunity, I would be committed to working with each of you to further advance the city, and I'm really looking forward to this forum this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Next is Aretha Farrell-Benavides. And Aretha, you have 5 minutes to give an overview of your background and why you want to be Evanston's next city manager.
Well, thank you. And it is, as she mentioned, a pleasure to be here as we celebrate the month of October and breast cancer awareness, and you see women taking a leadership role. This is just a wonderful opportunity, and it's great to see this joining together. So as I said, I'm Aretha Farrell-Benavides. When asked why city management, I have to say, as many say, it's a calling. You see, I'm originally from Fort Worth, Texas. My mother represented the true meaning of local government public servant for over 28 years, where she worked with the city of Fort Worth. Through her work with the city manager's office, she was a beacon of hope for many. She became the voice for many of those who did not have a voice. She taught me that the job of a true public servant is to not only stand up, but to speak up and to ensure that all voices can be heard and represented as well as served. So today I am part of a unique group of second-generation local government public servants, challenged and motivated by our parents to accept the calling to not only lead, but determined to make a difference in our communities. So what makes me who I am and continues to motivate me is that I am more than just a public servant. I'm a wife, a mother, a daughter, a granddaughter, an aunt, a sister, and a friend to many. It's knowing that what I do matters that helps me to continue each day and to believe that what we do as public service really does matter. So what's prepared me to come before you today? First, it's education. I'm a graduate of Southern University with a degree in political science, and I have a master's from Howard University in public administration and international development. I've completed several executive training programs to include the University of Virginia, the Executive Leadership Institute, and even locally within the Chicago area, the Intergovernmental Executive Program at Harold Washington College. So my career path, what brings me to you today is that I've been filled with challenges of building my toolbox. My first local government job was over 30 years ago with the city of Fort Worth. Since that time, I accepted and pursued challenges that span the U.S. I've served at all levels of government. I've worked at the Central Intelligence Agency with the federal government. I've worked for the governor of the state of Maryland, and I've worked with the city of Chicago and the District of Columbia. Each time I continue to build my toolbox and work to improve on what I bring to local government. Today I'm here before you, the residents of Evanston, with 32 years as a public servant, marked by significant and successful community engagement, fiscal management, and economic development experience. As a leader and change manager, I've been committed, innovative, results-driven, community-oriented municipal leader, utilizing the gift of knowledge, wisdom, intellect, emotional intelligence, compassion, and determination, coupled with a love for justice, equality, and learning. These traits have allowed me to serve in organizations at various levels. Why Evanston? Well, for me, it's a coming home. It's a true meaning of what it means to come someplace that you started. Over 20 years ago, I moved to the city of Chicago. I began my career with the city of Chicago in the IT department as an assistant chief information officer, and then I continued to work with the Chicago Housing Authority as the deputy chief of staff. My son, who is now a sophomore at the University of Kansas, was born at Northwestern Hospital. So it is a coming home. My career and time with the city of Chicago mattered. I formed lasting and long relationships, and so that's why I say it's a place that matters to me. So why now? Just over 3 years ago, I came to the city of Petersburg with a purpose, and that purpose was to make a difference and prove that government does work. Partnered with a group of determined individuals, I set out to fix what many thought could not be fixed, both fiscal and operational reform, and to reinvigorate the economy. It's been a great challenge. Petersburg, Virginia is a great community. We have 32,000 residents, and very much like Evanston, we have an extended community. We have the Virginia State University, and we also have the Fort Lee Military Group. We are both a city and a county, so we have both social service issues, but we also have all of your city government. So today I come before you, a determined, a committed individual ready to serve the people of Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you, Aretha. And next, Erica Storley, please give us an overview of your background and why you want to be Evanston's next city manager. And you're on mute. You are muted.
That's going to be in the dictionary for 2020's word, is you're on mute. Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate it. My name is Erica Storley, and I'm honored to be here today in the company of two other talented women competing for this position. I have been the interim city manager for a little over a year now. I have been fortunate to have held various positions at the city since 2004, working my way up and gaining valuable experience and knowledge in different departments. For most of my career, I have worked quietly behind the scenes, building relationships with our staff, residents, businesses, and community organizations. These relationships have been invaluable over the years, allowing us to work together to solve problems and to provide creative ideas to our biggest challenges. Tonight, I want to take time to talk about where I came from and what values I bring to this position, so that you can get a chance to know me a little better and have an understanding of what I bring to the position. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. My parents divorced when I was young, and we had little money. We didn't have a lot in terms of possessions or opportunities. We didn't even have a stoplight. But what we did have was an extended family that loved us and an attitude that we were in control of our own future. We treated others how we wanted to be treated, and we didn't judge someone else until we had walked a mile in their shoes. We had good public schools, and I often thank my English teachers for my writing skills. The other thing we had that was life-changing for me was a public library. In a town of not much, the library was my haven. I loved roaming the shelves and reading about everything in the world that I couldn't experience in my hometown because the internet had not yet arrived. This was my first taste of local government in action, and it cultivated in me a great appreciation for what life-changing public services are provided to communities every day. I wasn't quite sure then what I wanted to be when I grew up, but when I started working for the city of Evanston, I knew I was home. It is my great joy and passion to be able to serve this community every day. I earned my bachelor's degree at age 30 and my master's at age 40 with 4 small kids at home, all while working full-time. I can tell you from experience that requires an incredible amount of perseverance. After that, I helped my mom get her bachelor's degree at an age I won't reveal. I value education and hard work. I value personal relationships and working together to achieve common goals. I take a calm approach to everything, and I do not get rattled by much, even a worldwide pandemic. This approach keeps everyone focused on the mission and able to do their best work. I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. I do not need to have all the answers. I'm always prepared, but I listen more than I speak because I want to know and understand everyone's concerns and priorities. Why do I want to be Evanston's next city manager? I have an unconditional love for Evanston and the collective impact that we can make when we focus on a common goal. Since the day I started working here, we have always been raising the bar. We are not perfect, far from it, but we pursue improving our city with a relentlessness and a tenacity that is unparalleled. I am not perfect either, but I am always striving to be better and improve myself and to help those around me get better too. I don't have a learning curve. I live and breathe Evanston every day. My kids go to school here and I experience the joy of our successes and I endure the pain of our challenges, especially those that come with e-learning. Everything that I can list off as accomplishments in my career were not solely my doing. Everything we have achieved together. Our staff is phenomenal, group of professionals who amaze me every day. I can only hope that they learn as much from me as I do from them. I always have the city's best interests at heart. I do what's best for the organization and the city, even if it is unpopular or disappointing to some. It is challenging, but I am built for it, and I have never wavered in my responsibility to the city and everyone who calls it home. I come with no personal agenda, only shared goals and a unified vision for what we can build together. I respect and admire the City Council and the community for their efforts and commitment day in and day out to move our city forward and address the needs of all of our residents. I am absolutely committed to moving forward and working with everyone, no matter if we have worked together for years or if we have not yet even met. I'm excited to keep the momentum going to continue to tackle the challenges that lie ahead and to remember to take the time to reflect on our successes and thank those who helped make it happen. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to the rest of the forum this evening.
Thank you, Erica. And by lot, you have the first answer to the next question, so you don't mute yourself yet.
Okay.
So this is the first question. Last year, the Evanston City Council passed a resolution to end structural racism and achieve racial equity by eradicating the effects of systematically racist practices from city government and all city-affiliated organizations. This is a two-part question. The first part, in your experience in public service, please name one systematically racist practice or effect of past practices that you ended or took steps to mitigate. And number two, if you were to get this position, what specific steps would you take in your first 90 days to achieve the council's goal? And I'm happy to repeat any or all of that. It's a lot, I know.
If you could just repeat the first part of the first question, that would be great.
The first part of, in your experience in public service?
Yes.
In your experience in public service, please name one systemically racist. I may have said systematically, I apologize. One systemically racist practice or effect of past practices that you ended or took steps to mitigate.
On this one, I'm going to talk a little bit about our reparations initiative. So obviously, we're all familiar with the wide disparity in housing and wealth that exists in the Black and Brown community. And that exists and continues to persist because of racist practices, not just with redlining, but with the way that loans were given out in the past and the way that the resources and wealth of the United States was distributed inequitably in an effort to be racist against marginalized communities. So one of the many things, the city of Evanston has been a leader in this effort, but yet still we have so far to go. One of the things that we did last year with the leadership of our city council, and especially Alderman Robin Rue Simmons, was embarked upon an effort to bring forward actual reparations to help repatriate those who were most affected by those practices in the past. It was probably one of my greatest career highlights personally that I was able to help draft the resolution with our Corporation Council that implemented the reparations fund, utilizing the cannabis revenues that we're receiving now that cannabis is legal recreationally in the state of Illinois. So that is one area that we have been a leader on. It is one of many, but I also address that we still have so far to go. But I am committed to working with our staff, our city council, and the residents to help move forward and achieve racial equity very, very soon, because we can do this together in a collaborative effort with our community partners and all of our residents. And the second question, if you wouldn't mind repeating it.
If you were to get this position, what specific steps would you take in your first 90 days to achieve the council's goal?
Gotcha. So we've been working on this for many years in collaboration with our senior staff at all of our levels. Our assistant city manager has been working with me on a 3-year plan on how we're going to spend some of the fund that Northwestern has provided. Historically, it's been a fund that's been used to fund projects that are, capital projects or funding. But this year specifically, Northwestern and the city agreed that the $1 million that we received from Northwestern was going to be spent towards advancing racial equity. So Kimberly and I have been working on a 3-year plan that's going to include some components of, well, actually, I shouldn't really say too much about it yet because the mayor and the president have not yet announced exactly what it entails, but it's been very rewarding to work on that project. And I know that there will be an announcement soon talking about how we're going to propose to spend that $1 million and what kinds of initiatives are going to be put forward out of that money.
Okay, thank you, Erica. And next is Marie. And Marie, would you like me to repeat the question?
If you wouldn't mind.
No problem. Last year, the Evanston City Council passed a resolution to end structural racism and achieve racial equity by eradicating the effects of systemically racist past practices from city government and all city affiliated organizations. This is a 2-part question. In your experience in public service, please name one systemically racist practice or effect of past practices that you ended or took steps to mitigate. And 2, if you were to get this position, what specific steps would you take in your first 90 days to achieve the council's goal?
Okay, thank you. So first, what a great resolution to pass and how forward-thinking and community inclusive, and another reason why I would want to be part of Evanston. To draw what I have done, I'll go back pretty far into my career when I was the executive director of Carol Jones Recovery Center, which was a substance abuse recovery program that partnered with Medicaid and other insurances for low-income women. And so that was at the time when drug courts, commonly called boutique courts at that time, were coming into practice. That's how far this example goes back. And so there was a drug court starting in that community, which as the executive director of the substance abuse facility, I was really proud to participate in and be part of. The eligibility requirements were for women that had methamphetamine addictions only. While drugs can cross all races, genders, and all of that, at that time, methamphetamine was more common to white individuals. And that is still the case in large part today. However, so what that practice did, while not intentional to keep women of color out of the drug court, that was the result. Is that if you didn't have a methamphetamine addiction, then you weren't able to be in this program, which meant you also didn't have capability to have some of the programs that help to reunite you with children, with family, with housing, that sort of thing. So once I realized that, I immediately started, and what those unintended consequences were after it was abundantly clear that the participants were, it's clearly just one group of women, I was able to meet with other community stakeholders, judges, other treatment practitioners, and we were able to change the rules of the program. And it did take some time, took some months, but we were in the end successful in doing that. And that made it an equitable program. And so what happened is we removed the type of substance that could qualify somebody. So it simply became an addiction and being criminal justice involved. So I was really proud of that effort. In terms of what I would do in my first steps, really becoming acquainted with the work that has already been done. And then also looking, so what I find now in today's practice is it's typically unintended consequences from policies. Are those policies built with a lens to really consider the impact that they have on all community members, all populations? And so consistently and continually reviewing those and having the courage to back up those policies, to work with council in terms of reversing, department directors, whoever that may be, the stakeholders, to see how we can fix those things. But keeping a pulse on what is occurring and working with community, of course, to figure out and to learn community perspective on the policies that have been put in place. Thank you.
And Heidi, I tried to sign so that I'm not interrupting people's sentences, but apparently it's not viewable on screen. So I'm going to.
Well, we know you're signaling, so that might be helpful. All right, Aretha, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, ma'am. So, as we look at our government organizations today, we start to focus on how do we create a diverse workforce. And part of that is how do we reach beyond some of the unconscious bias that exists. One example is when many people apply for a job, people don't focus on the fact that people will look at your name, they will look at your education, and they will form some type of bias. Even little things like where you live in the neighborhood you live in. So as we started to move to it, when I look at something we did most recently within the city of Petersburg, is we did blind interviews. Each candidate who applied for a promotion within our fire department was given a number. You did not know their name and you did not see their face. And so they were asked questions and someone listened to the responses. What that gave you is it took away the biases. Now, part of that is something that I think we've got to roll out more and more. So when we start to look at applications in our organizations, when we take out those criteria that people look at and form opinions, I think that's very important. So what would I do? I would look at our hiring practices, because for us to become a more racially diverse and a more equitable from cultural differences is we've got to take away those things that people form quick opinions on. That includes looking at our applications and seeing what questions we're asking that individuals, whether they know it or not, may be used against them. Whether it's your geographical location, your education, or even photos, because photos sometimes people form an opinion. And so that's what I would focus on looking at, is not only our hiring practices, but also how we look at our promotional opportunities within.
Thank you, Aretha. And Aretha, you'll have the first answer to the next question, which is much shorter. You'll be happy.
Okay.
This question is, what would be your top three priorities as the new city manager?
Wow. So a new city manager coming into a new organization, there are a lot of challenges, but one of the major challenges that we are all facing right now is what is the future of us with COVID-19? I've got to come in and not only work with the existing staff to understand what are our fiscal constraints, but what are the things that are coming in the future. When we started this process just a little over 6 months ago, we were all told by November this would be done. So now we've got to think of long haul. What does our operations look like? Many of the norms that have become common to us, going to an office, have changed. And so now we've got to look long term as what do our long term operations look like? And so it's an operational review. The next part goes into our fiscal review. As we've looked at the revenues that are coming in and we're seeing some shortfalls right now, we've got to think long term and what do those look like? Sometimes when we look at our operational changes, we make changes that are based on a short-term fix. What is the long term? So for example, and furloughs, they're a great opportunity to take care of now, but what does the future look like and what are those long-term changes we have to make? And finally, it's part of that transition is really getting to know Evanston and the people. This is a very engaged community. This means that I've got to be on the ground and starting to talk to the community and talking to the community members, getting to know the staff, getting to know the council, and working to make sure that I understand what the true challenges are that you can only understand when you're on the ground within the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Aretha. Erica, what will be your top three priorities if you are the next city manager?
Thank you. So the first priority is going to be recovering from the pandemic. And what I mean by recovering from that is ensuring that our recovery is equitable. So COVID has exposed inequities that we knew existed for a long time. But if we return to, what is called pre-COVID life, what what life was like before this pandemic, that doesn't change what those inequities that existed before. So we need to completely change how we're looking at our future in light of trying to eliminate those inequities. But the first priority is a recovery that is equitable for everybody. And that is part of the City Council's goal of ensuring equity in all city operations. The second part of that is our fiscal recovery. The city is very challenged financially. We have had some stress on our budget for years, but we have also an incredible community that has resilience. And we have a lot of attributes that make us a very attractive place to work and to live and to do business. Our business community is really struggling right now, and the economic recovery for our business community is going to be a paramount priority for all of us. We're going to need to do what we can to help our small businesses survive and thrive, because our small businesses are the fabric of our community and what makes us unique and special. My other priority is definitely going to be the implementation of our Climate Action and Resilience Plan. The Climate Action Plan was created in 2018. We have some very aggressive goals that need to be met. And in order to achieve those goals ahead of schedule, which is my goal, we're going to have to make some very bold policies that not everybody will like, but are necessary in order for us to combat the climate crisis. So those would be my 3 top priorities.
Thank you, Erica. And Marie, what would be your 3 top priorities if you were the new city manager?
So it would certainly be meeting with staff, meeting with stakeholders to include community and business and budget. And not in any particular order. As a manager, you have to be able to do several things at the same time. And all of those things are certainly priority. And who knows where we will be in terms of COVID and the pandemic. So I say meet with, hopefully it will be in person, but we may have to use all of our same virtual tools. But it would be really important to me, however that meeting looks, but to be able to start immediately building relationships and to hear from the perspectives of those stakeholders, and stakeholders including employees, and community stakeholders, business stakeholders as well, but their perspectives on challenges, perhaps opportunities. That's where as we talk about budget and budget constraints, how do we partner more, the whole public-private partnerships, engaging perhaps additionally in P3s, but really digging in and seeing what those priorities are and what the past priorities have been. What were the previous strategic plans? We are certainly entering a new time with COVID, and while hopefully vaccinations and other things will happen, we're still going to be living with a new normal for quite some time. So what does that mean? How does business change and how does government pivot? And I would be there to help put those pieces together.
Thank you, Marie. And Marie, you have the first answer to the next question. What do you believe will be your biggest challenge if selected for this position, and how will you overcome it?
So for any new manager that comes from outside of the organization or for outside the community, I believe the biggest challenge is going to be establishing relationships. I have great relationships in my own rights and am capable of being a manager, but there is that curve of building those new relationships, establishing credibility. So I would immediately start to work, as I shared, being about in the community and meeting people and having those relationships, becoming familiar with budgets, becoming familiar with staff, and just learning the area, the community, and the heartbeats and pulse of each individual community. That would be the largest challenge, but it's also the biggest opportunity.
Thank you, Marie. And Aretha, what do you believe would be your biggest challenge if selected for this position, and how will you overcome it?
Well, I believe the biggest challenge is really jumping in and getting to know the culture. I've been serving on the East Coast within Virginia, which is a different form of government. As a strong city, that means that I have functions that span beyond just city functions. And so what I believe the challenge is going in and starting to get up to speed as quickly as possible on the operations, the policies, the things that you know naturally as you understand a budget, but you need to understand the budget there. Different governments are different. The people, the staff, as Erica has done a wonderful job. She has led this organization on an interim basis for over a year. So what we've got to get back to is stabilization. So how will I do that? I will come in and start to sit down, to talk, to meet, whether virtual or in person, but to really get to know Evanston and those people. and spend that time. And so the challenge is, because we are still living in a pandemic, is it's very difficult to do some of the things that would come natural for me, which would include community meetings and brown bag meetings with staff and ride along. It changes. So it's going to be making sure that I can give the time and attention to the community given the pandemic.
Thank you, Aretha. And Erica, what do you believe will be your biggest challenge if selected for this position, and how will you overcome it?
Oh, thank you. I think the biggest challenge is always the competing priorities. Our community is filled with diverse voices and diverse ideas about what's best for the city. So that comes with a great amount of energy and enthusiasm, but it also comes with inherent conflict. I'm also thinking about, let me backtrack. How am I going to overcome that? It's important for the city manager and all of our senior staff to help build unity around the direction that we're going, and that the policies and that the direction that we're receiving from the city council. So the city council is setting our priorities, they're setting our goals, they're telling us where we want the ship to head. But it's my role to work with our staff and to work with the community to help keep the ship going in the right direction, and to help make sure everybody understands what the common goals are. Because we can have these competing priorities shifting through the day, all day long. But we really, in order to make really lasting and meaningful progress towards our goals, we have to stay focused on what end result we're trying to achieve. So how will I overcome that? The way that I always have. I'll continue to be a sounding board for our council and our staff, listen to everybody's ideas and thoughts, and help to reiterate and constantly focus everybody on what those common goals are and what we're trying to achieve and where we're headed.
Thank you, Erica. And Erica, you have the first answer to the next question. The City of Evanston has some significant budget challenges. How have you addressed budget shortfalls in your community? And based on what you know of Evanston's budget, how would you address future budget issues?
So, of course, the pandemic has affected our fiscal state pretty dramatically. We had a $12 million shortfall this year that we had to make up pretty quickly. Starting in April, I started working with our staff to identify areas where we could reduce our costs and achieve savings so that we could reduce the harm that was going to happen because of those falling revenues. That included a variety of ideas that were implemented, including furlough days, renegotiation of contracts. We were able to save a lot of money by working with our vendors to negotiate savings on our contracts. And then I had to go and talk to our employee unions, and I had to explain the situation that we were in and ask our employees to give concessions that equaled the non-union furlough days that I had mandated right after the pandemic started. That was very hard to do because we were in the middle of a 4-year contract, and we're only in the beginning of the second year of a 4-year contract that we had just signed the deal on. And it's always hard to go to your employees and when they're working harder and doing more and ask them to do it for less. It was absolutely necessary. We also instituted a hiring freeze, and right now we have about 40-ish vacant positions that we're holding vacant. Probably we'll do that into next year in order to continue to achieve savings. It makes it very challenging for us on a day-to-day basis to operate with far less people than we're used to operating with. But the reality of the situation required us to do that, and acting decisively and quickly really helped mitigate that over the long term. So yes, we have challenges, but like I said earlier, we have tremendous opportunities. This city is amazing, and there are so many things that make it great, and there is that resilience that we have, that as long as we continue to work towards making the city the best it can be, businesses will want to be here, and people will want to live here, people will want to move here. Hopefully Northwestern students will want to start businesses and grow them here. If we provide the foundation for them to be successful, that can happen. So I'm very optimistic about our fiscal future, but it's going to take some hard decisions over the course of the next few years to sort of get us back into a position where we have a better cushion of a fund balance that we've had to eat into a little bit this year. But I'm also very optimistic about where we can go with our budget and our fiscal future.
Thank you, Erica. And Marie, you have the answer to this question. I'll read it again. The City of Evanston has some significant budget challenges. How have you addressed budget shortfalls in your community? And based on what you know of Evanston's budget, how would you address future budget issues?
Thanks so much, Heidi. Unfortunately, budgets are a challenge across local jurisdictions. And philosophically, we can't cut our way out of a structural deficit. So there are short-term things that can be done, such as, working with department directors to continue identifying where there's additional items that can be, cost saved and reduced. And that certainly should be done, but that typically is not a long-term strategy. Things like attrition, not, once positions are vacant, holding them for a while, or actually having an all-out holding freeze. One of the things that we have done within our organization throughout this time is voluntary reduction of hours. We found that a lot of people, as for their homeschooling, virtual learning, that perhaps being home is better for them and families. So if they can voluntarily reduce some of their hours while keeping benefits, that's certainly an option as well. But again, those are short-term options. And so really the only way out of a structural deficit is to bring in additional revenues. And so that gets to where you have to look creatively, and that's your partnerships, perhaps with private entities, bringing in new funds. Grant funds can often be a double-edged sword, but they can help through a period and duration as you're cost replacing other things. That's also an option. And then just continuing to work fiscally sound and making progress. These are things that don't occur within one budget cycle. So it really determines and needs long-term planning. And so I do have a lot of experience with that in the organizations that I have held leadership positions in. Unfortunately, I have more experience than I want with structural deficits. And so happy to continue, and but would have to dig into Evanston's budgets, and of course would work with the people there that know the budgets inside and outside, budget teams, department directors. But again, I think the key there is really the long-term planning and recognizing that these things take more than one budget cycle.
Thank you, Marie. Aretha, you have the last answer to this question. The City of Evanston has some significant budget challenges. How have you addressed budget shortfalls in your community? And based on what you know of Evanston's budget, how would you address future budget issues?
Well, it goes without saying. The announcement on the news when I was appointed the city manager of Petersburg said, city manager takes job facing a $20 million deficit. That was a big deficit. The city of Petersburg, over the course of years, had depleted its fund balance to over $15 million. Upon being selected, we had a negative $7 million fund balance. Our bond rating had decreased and things were not working. We brought in an interim management team prior to my starting who went through and made some structural changes. They worked with both our police and fire. Our employees took a 10% cut in pay. We looked at everything from top to bottom. My second stance when I was selected was to come in and move toward that next phase. And that next phase was growth. And so what we were able to do over the course of 3 years is we planned to start to increase our fund balance by $1 million every year. How do we do that? We looked at the budget from top to bottom. I am a hands-on budget person. We started from the beginning. We looked at where the money was coming and where the money was going. And we looked to see where those went together. We tried to understand better what were the revenue cycles that were affecting it. One tool we created was a revenue manual so that we could better define that revenue. But ultimately, what we were able to do is we've been able to turn around the city of Petersburg. Today and this year, we boasted of an unassigned fund balance of $8 million. That's over a $15 million change in just 3 years. How did we do that? We took a top to bottom look at the budget. We started to look at expenditures, to look at what things we can do differently. And we partnered not only with our employees, but we partnered with our community to figure out what are the things we were doing wrong. And so my experience has been in a significant budget challenge. And how you move forward, it's been good for us. As we look at COVID-19, we immediately made those tough decisions. We made the decisions, whether they were hiring freezes or spending freezes, but to look at how we were spending our money and also making sure that we were making the best decisions at that time. There's a lot of discretionary spending that happens. One of the unique challenges that we have in unions, we don't have unions. But that's a whole contract negotiation that requires a partnership. When I worked in the District of Columbia, we had a strong partnership with our labor unions. And it's important that they are part of the discussion and the decision. And so part of what I would do is we've got to take the top to bottom look. This is not the first year that Evanston faced a budget challenge. This has been going on for a while. So we got to figure out fundamentally why it's happening and what other steps we can take to create truly long-term fiscal stabilization. Thank you.
Thank you, Aretha. And you have the first answer to the next question. Does your community have a climate action plan? If so, please discuss it. If not, please discuss your priorities regarding climate action. And what specific policies would you develop to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, so my community does not have a climate action plan, and actually we are a Dillon rule state. And so what that means is, unlike home rule, all of our rules fall under the state. And so our charter change happens through the state. So the state actually has a climate action plan. Our city over the years have taken steps toward different things. And so one of the things that I would focus on, and I focused on, is what are we doing different with our vehicles? We have a fleet of vehicles. We have folks who travel. We've looked at changing not only the fuel that they're using and looking at it that way, but also the types of vehicles you buy. One of the things that I have in the city of Petersburg is I actually have a transit authority. And so we run the regional bus authority. We've now looked at how do we change out our fleet of buses to make sure that they're more energy efficient. And so we have slowly been moving those into that next generation. The next phase of it is where we start to look at our overall organization, our building consolidation. We're now starting to look at what we can do there. Within our community, we're looking at also our lighting. We are moving with a plan to change our lighting out to all LED lights. And so those are the types of things that I focus on. How does it start? But it starts internally. One great example of a climate action process that happened in the District of Columbia is that we actually moved to a fully recyclable situation. You did not have a trash can in your office. There were no trash cans allowed. And so we started inside. We started with our policies. We started with all of our processes and how we do things internally. And that's how I would focus with us, because the community is going to do their part. They're very, very, very active now in the next phases of the Community Action Plan in Evanston. But we've also got to make sure there are internal changes that happen also. And that's where I would start. Thank you.
Thank you, Aretha. And Erica, you're next for this question. I'll repeat it. Does your community have a climate action plan? If so, please discuss it. If not, please discuss your priorities regarding climate action and what specific policies would you develop to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? Erica, you're muted.
Thank you. We do have a climate action and resilience plan. We call it CARP. It's been around since 2018 when it was adopted, but before that we had another one and we had achieved those goals, so it was time to do the next iteration of the plan. The plan requires us to achieve some very measurable results by 2050, including zero waste. The most important part about the Climate Action Resilience Plan is what we're going to do to get there. And it's very good to have a plan, but it's even better to implement the policies that are necessary to achieve the goals of the plan and not just have the plan sit on the shelf. So Kumar Jensen, our sustainability coordinator, and I sat down earlier this year and we developed a prioritized list of what policies were needed to get us where we need to be starting this year in terms of achieving those goals. One of those policies is the phase out of single-use plastics. That will be a very big change for our community, but it is going to be necessary. The other is a re-envisioning of our plastic bag ban. We've had the plastic bag ban for many years, but if you're familiar with shopping in Evanston, now instead of getting a very thin plastic bag, you get a very thick plastic bag. So perhaps we didn't achieve the intended outcome there. We'll be looking at how we can do better on our plastic bag ban. And then the last thing is potentially looking at the elimination of natural gas as for use in new construction. So this one is very controversial. People like to use gas, but it is not very good for the environment. Potentially requiring new construction in Evanston to eliminate natural gas and rely only on electric that is sourced from renewable sources would go a long way towards us achieving those goals. That is just a few of the many initiatives that have been developed with Kumar and the prioritized list. We'll be bringing those policies to the council starting this fall. We took a little break during the pandemic, but those policies are still there and ready to go. But we're going to need to educate the community on why it's important. There's a lot of people who understand why it's important and why it needs to be done. But there's also a lot of people who really have habits that are, ingrained and need to help understand why we're all in this together and why there is a sense of urgency around it.
Thank you, Erica. And Marie, does your community have a climate action plan? If so, please discuss it. If not, please discuss your priorities regarding climate action. What specific policies would you develop to reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Thank you. So my community has several climate action plans. The various cities comprised within the county have theirs. The county also does have a sustainability plan. I come from a very environmentally conscious community. We are the first dark skies community in the nation, just as an example. So yes, I certainly am very familiar with climate action plans and some of the items that have already been noted, but certainly implementing single-use plastic rules. And in terms of internal organization, certainly looking at fleet operations and determining how those can be phased to more environmentally efficient vehicles. And especially on the public works side, there's a lot of environmentally friendly public works things that are coming about, both especially as we think about winter and snow spread and elements and how that can be mitigated, So definitely those would be some policies, and would have to continue looking and working with Evanston to see what's already being done internally. But those are some of the first things that I would look at. Ordering practices, sustainable ordering practices that for both employees and then of course vendors. And then, so probably our biggest asset, and I believe Evanston is doing this as well, and I would certainly continue, but that is working with the university. Working with the university on establishing green policies, helping with messaging, helping convey that, and then of course with programs and innovations. And so those would be some of the first places that I would start.
Thank you, Marie. And Marie, you have the first answer to the next question. Please describe your views on how the city manager can communicate with residents to elicit their views and priorities, while at the same time conveying to residents an accurate view of the demands on Evanston government and the constraints on resources. Include specific experiences that illustrate your views.
Thank you. So that it's a two-way conversation, and it's not a one and done. Those conversations and the back and forth with community has to be established, and it has to be consistent, and it needs to be specific to community. Evanston itself is comprised of many different communities and ways that people receive their information. So that's very important to me, whether it's meeting in person to share those constraints and challenges that the city is having, as well as receiving that feedback. And having that feedback loop is something that I'm incredibly invested in. And then the second piece of your question, Heidi?
Let me just reread the last part. And at the same time, conveying to residents an accurate view of the demands on Evanston government and the constraints on resources. Include specific experiences that illustrate your views.
You know, leading the COVID pandemic certainly gives me a lot of examples that I could share in terms of limited resources and community demand. The testing, for example. We are doing testing, as I shared in my opening. We are doing it free to the community. You can come once or you can come 10 times, don't need doctor's orders. However, as I shared, our community is incredibly large, over 18,000 square miles, which means while we're providing the service, you may still have to travel quite some way to get to Flagstaff to receive it. And so we've continually had outlying communities who have questioned the equitability in that and how they can have that same service. And, you know, ideally, we would be able to roll that out to all areas of community. But what we have had to settle on is doing mobile testing events within outlying communities, and that has been quite a compromise. And it seems to have met the need of those outlying communities. But that was a two-way exchange. You know, hearing from community members that they also wanted the same service and that there were transportation limitations and just family challenges in doing that. And so acknowledging that and coming up with solutions, but also sharing back with the community the real limitations of being in several outlying communities, along with just the medical transport and the cost. And so that's just one example, and I could share others. I know time is limited. But the point being is that communication and having it candidly on all sides, and I'm very equipped to do that.
Thank you, Marie. Aretha, it's your turn to answer this question. Please describe your views on how the city manager can communicate with residents to elicit their views and priorities, while at the same time conveying to residents an accurate view of the demands on Evanston government and the constraints on resources. Include specific experiences that illustrate your views.
So communication to me is specific to the community. For example, I have a community that's very diverse. When I first became city manager, the police chief and I came on board at the same time, and we both had challenges. His challenges was we have 143 churches in our community. He said, I'm going to visit every church because he felt that was a way into meeting the community and talking to them. I said, I'm going to go to many of them with you, but I'm also going to travel all the streets. So one of the things that I created here in the city of Petersburg was my community ride-alongs, where I basically put the senior team in one of our trolleys and we went to our ward walks. We didn't just ride through the wards. We got off the trolley. We walked. We talked. We got to know the neighborhood. Many times our public officials sit at their desk and they're not out there. They're not listening. And so it's important to be a face that people know, that they recognize, and that they can feel that they have an open level of communication with them. I established a position that focused just on community affairs because I realized that part of my struggles and challenges would be to not only to try to fix or help Petersburg, I had to help the people. I had to understand who they were and what they needed. Many individuals focus on things on an electronic basis. One of the challenges, specifically with a heavy senior population, are the electronic challenges. I have employees and citizens who still read newspapers. So therefore, I have to focus on communicating to them in writing, with documents, with newsletters. But I do have some who like it electronically. So every Friday, we have a document that goes out called Experience Petersburg, telling people about what's going on and making sure that we're communicating with it. So now how do we do that, and how would I do that in the community? Is I've got to be out there. As much as a city manager is the CEO responsible for running the organization, you've got to know what you're running. You've got to go out there. You've got to be there. And as I look at a transition plan, and as I've done with the city of Petersburg, is I want to spend time with each of the aldermen to get to see the community, to get to know the people in the community. And that means going to meetings, going to the Rotary Club, the Kiwanis Club, and spending time with the community organizations to understand so that they know who I am and know how I represent them. And so my structure is varied. It just depends, but it has to reach the audience in which we're representing. Thank you.
Thank you, Aretha. And Erica, please describe your views on how the city manager can communicate with residents to elicit their views and priorities while at the same time conveying to residents an accurate view of the demands on Evanston government and the constraints on resources. Include specific experiences that illustrate your views.
Thank you. So I utilize a variety of means to communicate with our residents. Some of those are formal channels and some of those are informal channels. I really enjoy the variety and numerous amount of events that we have each year. We're very lucky to have so many events that we provide to the community, and that provides a natural way for me to engage with the public. I was just at National Night Out last night at one of our parks. It was delayed from when we typically do it in August to November or to October. But it was great to get out there and with my mask on, socially distanced, and just see people that I haven't seen in a while and talk to them and listen to them and hear what they have to say. Usually we have Streets Alive in September. We didn't have that this year, but we did have Bike the Ridge. We are trying to continue to provide opportunities for our residents to participate in recreational opportunities and civic life, even though we have to continue to be behind the screens when we have our formal meetings. So I'm trying to continue to have those conversations with our residents by any means necessary, any way I can, whether it's going shopping at the grocery store, visiting businesses in the area to see how they're doing, hearing directly from business owners, or going to these events. We have Starlight concerts, movies in the park. We just had a ribbon cutting last weekend for our new Robert Crown Center. All of these are opportunities to continue to get feedback from our residents on what they're going through, what they're seeing, what their concerns are, what their priorities are. But it's also an opportunity for me to share what the city is doing. I think our residents are very engaged and they're very knowledgeable about what the city is doing, and they get all of our communications and they read them. But sometimes it takes a one-on-one conversation to try to convey, certain priorities we'll always be working on, but sometimes we have financial challenges that we can't address all the challenges immediately. That's a delicate conversation because everybody cares passionately about the city and what their individual concerns are, but we have to balance it against the resources that we have available. and the priorities that the City Council has dictated.
Thank you, Erica. And you have the first answer to the next question. What is your stance on defunding the police or the reallocation of police resources? What are some of your recommendations to address this issue?
Sure. So the movement to defund the police is, I think, in a lot of ways, it's misunderstood, but it's absolutely necessary. And I wholeheartedly believe in what the goal is that's trying to be achieved, and that is to provide a better service. People are saying the service that is being provided right now is not meeting the need. We're asking our police officers to be mental health professionals, and we're asking our police officers to take on things that are outside of the realm of what public safety started out being. So while I don't think that eliminating our entire police force is an option, and nobody's ever said that that was an option, we do need to look at how we deliver the services that we deliver and see if there's a better way to do it. That's what we've always done. We've always looked at and examined ourselves to see, are we doing best practices? Is this meeting the needs of the community? And if it's not, what's a better way to do it? So we have implemented through our Human Services Committee a subcommittee to address an alternative police response model or an alternative 911 response model. And we're trying to identify what types of calls could an alternative service provider come along on in lieu of a police officer to achieve a better result or a better outcome from that situation. Our police officers are phenomenal. I think that the police department in Evanston is one of the best in the country. Very knowledgeable, very professional, very well trained, and they take on all of these responsibilities without complaint. But like I said, they may not be the best tasked to take on some of these calls. There may be other service providers in the community that have a better level of expertise and day-to-day interaction with individuals where they can provide a better level of care and concern for the whoever has called in for the service. So I'm releasing the budget on Friday for 2021. There is definitely going to be a reduction in the police budget. It has been a long time that it has been sort of politically feasible or acceptable to reduce police funding. Our police budget is the largest portion of our overall budget. It is very significant. That being said, we've had so many vacancies on our police force for a while that those reductions won't result in any layoffs of any police officers. But there is less money going towards the police department in next year's budget. And we have allocated some funding for this alternative police response to get us started.
30 seconds.
It would require more funding in future years. Part of the 2020 budget was the creation of the Human Services Fund, where we placed our social services into a separate fund so they did not have to compete with general fund services for those dollars.
Thank you, Erica. And Marie, it's your turn for this question. What is your stance on defunding the police or the reallocation of police resources? What are some of your recommendations to address this issue?
Thank you. So the term defund the police, I think, is quite a disservice to the whole conversation, because it really is about reinvesting in how we reinvest in both police force and how we reinvest in community, and particularly disadvantaged communities that often have not had other resources. And so I certainly agree with reviewing police budgets and looking and seeing where some of those dollars could be reinvested in community. And right now, I think that really comes through as mental health. And if that means perhaps adding mental health trained staff on police force, having them within health departments, other community services, community response situated departments, and partnering with police, I think is very well advised, and looking at it more as an interdisciplinary approach, which has happened in many other settings. So I think it all depends on how it is done. I believe we will always need a police force and the great men and women that serve on the police force, but it's time to do business differently. And I would certainly like to be engaged in those conversations. This is what I spend a great deal of my work doing in my current position is, again, I'm charged with working with health, criminal justice, and social service agencies in my current role. And so this not only is a national conversation, it hits very close home to my community as well. And I find it interesting, as a nation, we've defunded funded education and healthcare for quite some time, and it has not received the outcries to fund the police. So one of the things I would really like to help do is reframe the narrative in that and see how we can turn it more into a strategic conversation, again, to reinvest in community. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. And Aretha, what is your stance on defunding the police or the reallocation of police resources? What are some of your recommendations to address this issue?
Well, I look at it and I think the comments that the other candidates gave, because it is a conversation we have to have. And what are we looking at is what is our responsibility as administrators when we look at the recruitment process for our public safety officials. We have a responsibility to not only look through the recruitment, but also the training process, the support mechanism. Many of the issues that we're dealing with are things that come from an environment that we haven't spent a lot of time focusing on. And so I believe that the reallocation of resources have to go towards some of the training, some of the social training that's necessary, but also the evaluation. One of the things that I noticed when I worked with the city of Sunnyvale, California, we recruited very heavily from the military community, as we do here within Petersburg. Part of that is not looking at what other trauma may possibly exist that causes some of the things that we are seeing and that's happening. And so one of the things that I am very, very into is really understanding the root causes of the problems we're having socially with the police. This is not a new issue. This is something that has existed for years, but we haven't focused on it. We haven't made the systemic changes. We have policies that exist. We put body cameras on saying that we're documenting it, but we're not dealing with the root cause of what's happening within our communities. And so what I believe is that we've got to reevaluate what does that mean and who do we recruit, but also evaluating them along the way to make sure that they are truly ready to serve. And so those funding includes funding other things. When we talk about mental health, that is an issue. But it's also understanding those individuals that we put a badge on and give them an opportunity to serve and protect. I support our police, but I also know that they also need our support in helping them to get the tools they need to better address what they've been challenged with. Thank you.
Thank you, Aretha. And Aretha, you have the first answer to the next question. What responsibility do you think a municipality has for increasing and maintaining an adequate supply of affordable housing? What experience do you have in increasing the supply of affordable housing, and what steps would you take to ensure a sufficient supply for Evanston?
Well, I believe that affordable housing should be based on the community. There are challenges that exist within certain communities where individuals are challenged and do not have access to them, but it varies. I will use my past organization. The city of Glen Heights was a bedroom community. We had single family homes. Many of our employees who were lower income individuals would travel in from other places. We did not have a multifamily unit. So we worked in partnership with a developer to develop our first apartment complex. It was a workforce housing project. And so what many people said was, oh my gosh, it's Section 8, oh, it's terrible. But what they didn't understand, and it's part of an education process, is that affordable housing is a necessity. Another example of where affordable housing became a challenge was when I was in Los Alamos, New Mexico, where many of my police officers, because of the high cost of living, could not afford to live in the community. We had to work with the federal government to redefine what affordable housing was. And so all of these programs have been part of my past. When I worked in Chicago, part of what we were creating with the Plan for Transformation for Chicago Public Housing was a new community. And that new community talked about creating a mixed development of housing. As we started with the demolition of the houses, of the developments, we looked at market rate and affordable and creating that type of living environment that's important. And so throughout my career, I've been actively engaged. Now, is it the thing that I think that every community is in need of? No. But you've got to assess the community. One of the rules in Texas is looking to make sure that there is not a concentration of low-income housing in some areas, but there is a mixed development. And so I've worked on projects and with developers to implement affordable housing programs.
Thank you, Aretha. Erica, it's your turn to answer this question. What responsibility do you think a municipality has for increasing and maintaining an adequate supply of affordable housing? What experience do you have in increasing the supply of affordable housing, and what steps would you take to ensure a sufficient supply for Evanston?
Thank you. I absolutely believe it's a responsibility of the city to help create affordable housing within the city. Evanston is struggling with high cost housing, and we have struggled with it for decades. We have made, I think, great progress, but again, always raising the bar, and we still have a long way to go. Our initial inclusionary housing ordinance created our Affordable Housing Fund, which required any new developments to include on-site affordable housing units or pay a fee in lieu into our Affordable Housing Fund. We determined that that was not working as well as it could be, and so we made some tweaks to it a few years ago to reduce that ability to sort of pay in lieu of, because we weren't seeing the numbers of units being provided that we wanted to see. And so the revision to that has helped us achieve a greater number of units being built in all new construction planned developments. So that's very encouraging that we're seeing those numbers in those developments. But again, those, if you get 15 or 20 units out of a planned development, that's not moving the needle citywide. You have to do more. One of the other things that we've done is change our zoning code to allow affordable dwelling or on-site dwelling units that are affordable, which are, also called ADUs. So either adding a granny flat over the garage in the backyard, or adding a basement dwelling unit. Anytime we can allow somebody to convert an existing dwelling unit into an additional dwelling unit, it's going to be far less expensive than building a brand new unit. And so, working with our community partners, those were big pushes over the last few years that really, people really advocated for those. Those changes didn't come easily. We had a historical policy on the books that said if you had a coach house in the backyard, you could only rent it if you lived in the main house or if it was a relative or somebody that you knew. So you could not rent it to anybody who wanted to rent it. And so that eliminated the ability for those to become affordable units for other community members to enjoy. The last piece of that is just the partnerships that we need to have with all of our housing providers. There's a lot of housing providers in the community that are interested in building affordable units and building affordable unit developments. And part of that sometimes has to be, being creative about how we help those developers fund those units. So using that Affordable Housing Fund with the development that was approved for Howard Street, 60-unit senior development.
30 seconds.
The city has put in a tremendous amount of money from the Affordable Housing Fund to make sure that that development happens. And we're seeing an addition to an existing development in the downtown on Sherman Avenue, which is very exciting to see a mixed income development going in adjacent to an existing development. So just being creative about the built environment that we already have. We don't have a lot of land available to us, so we have to be creative with what we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. And Marie, you have the last answer to this question. What responsibility do you think a municipality has for increasing and maintaining an adequate supply of affordable housing? What experience do you have in increasing the supply of affordable housing, and what steps would you take to ensure a sufficient supply for Evanston?
Great, thank you. So I absolutely think that it is the city's responsibility, or at least at a minimum, a shared responsibility to ensure affordable housing. Cities are charged with caring for those that live there, and so it's certainly an important thing. I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback. I'll try again. So my community also faces many of these challenges. We're incredibly landlocked, having the growing college population, and it's really hard for working families to find affordable housing. A one-bedroom may go for $1,500. And so I share a lot of those same experiences that I believe are common in Evanston. So some of those things that my community has done and that I've participated in is some things that have already been mentioned. Working with partners, building mixed use apartments, shopping areas, and requiring that some of those be for affordable housing. And not just having those be the one-bedroom units, but having them actually be family units, 2- and 3-bedroom units. Also looking at zoning practices. And also looking at, this may or may not be popular because hits people differently, but looking at what city regulations are for Airbnb and that sort of thing, because that often reduces the stock of available of affordable housing. And so I think in order to be creative and really move future forward, that those types of policies have to be visited. But I certainly think affordable housing has to continue to be a conversation, particularly if we're going to grow and build in communities, because we've got to be able to retain people of all backgrounds and income levels. And it becomes quite a recruitment strategy and tool. People want to move to communities that they can afford to live in and to prosper. So very excited about being involved in those conversations.
Thank you, Marie. And you have the first answer to the next question.
Great.
How have you demonstrated humility in your team building activities within your organization and in your community outreach initiatives?
You know, that's a hard question to answer. Humility is just part of who I am. It's part of, I'm thankful to be where I am today. I am thankful to have come up through the ranks, to be a woman of color that is invited in the conversations and has the opportunity and the privilege to lead in conversations. And so being humble and being authentic and really having a collaborative spirit, it is who I am to want to build consensus and to bring people along to the conversation. In terms of how I would do that, it comes natural. And I think that is one of the key characteristics of any leader. And having the ability to hear feedback from others, whether that feedback is in agreement or perhaps it's in a complete different direction. I want to be able to have those candid conversations, whether it's with people who report to me or with it's those that I report to or community members. The only way we will progress is if we can have those honest conversations, get issues out on the table, and work cohesively and collaboratively to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. And Aretha, how have you demonstrated humility in your team building activities within your organization and in your community outreach initiatives?
Well, I believe that a true leader also has to be someone who can follow and being able to listen to the unique opinions of those around you. And so as a leader, it is very important to understand that there is something that everybody brings to the table. And that humility is to know that you don't always have the answers and you're not always right. And so when you put together a collective vision for the organization, that vision, although you may guide the vision, has to be the vision of those around you. Being humble comes natural to many of us because, as Marie mentioned, I'm an African-American female. My struggles are struggles that many people have not faced. Those struggles mean that I've had to work twice as hard. I've had to keep my eye on the prize. I've had to understand that a humble nature and a humble spirit will allow me to move forward. But it's also what's also motivated me. It's motivated me to do more and to offer more. When you work with community members, you have to see things from their perspective. You have to be a voice of reasoning, someone people can talk to, someone who knows how to listen as much as they know how to talk. And so the way that I demonstrate my humility is I participate in active listening. I not only listen to what they're saying, I listen to what they're not saying, their body language. And so that is how I practice humility.
Thank you, Aretha. And Erica, how have you demonstrated humility in your team building activities within your organization and in your community outreach initiatives?
I've expressed this a number of ways, one of which is I'm constantly appreciating the team and the contributions of the staff and the community. There's nothing that we can't achieve if we're all in this together, and it's never been about me. It's always been about the collective, and it's always been about the team. I appreciate my team. I appreciate that we get to do the amazing things that we get to do because we're all on the same page, and we can't all be on the same page if somebody's taking credit for something or if people aren't aligned to the priorities and the goal that we're all trying to achieve. I had another thought on this that I really wanted to mention, and now it totally escaped me. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Erica, you have the first answer to the next question. How do you involve Evanston residents in decision-making on high-profile issues? And can you give an example?
One of the great things about Evanston is the involvement of the community. We are rarely ever not hearing from our residents about the issues that we're facing. But that being said, we're not always hearing from every segment of the population. And so you have to be proactive about reaching out to residents from all areas of the city, from all incomes, from all facets of life. I totally forgot the question. Do you want to?
Oh, that's okay. How do you involve resident decision making in high profile issues, and do you have an example?
Yeah, again, tagging on to what I just said, it's great that we have the involvement that we do. And one of the best ways that we involve our community is to use them and their expertise and their skills that they volunteer for our boards, commissions, and committees. We have over 45 boards, commissions, and committees. I've been very fortunate to work with a number of community members on some of those committees. One specific example is the Alternatives to Arrest Committee. A couple of years ago, that committee was formed to decriminalize some of the things that young teens were getting arrested for, that then was creating a criminal record for them, that then challenged them as they went into their early adult and tried to have a career. The people that volunteered for that committee from our community, very high skilled, very passionate about this cause and trying to make sure that we got it right. It's really invaluable to have that kind of asset, is the community's willingness to volunteer and also the community's expertise on a variety of topics. The community here is very educated and very engaged and very much wants to help. And if you let them help, we will achieve really great things. The Alternatives to Arrest Committee is still in its existence. It's sort of gone on to phase 2. We were able to decriminalize a number of, I'm losing the term now, but now when a youth potentially would be going into a criminal justice system for a violation, now they're redirected to our administrative adjudication, and they're handled in a much more compassionate, more empathetic, and better scenario so that they can have a better outcome for their life. And when we're young, we know we all do silly things and don't always make good decisions. So you don't want to be penalized for life for some of those.
Thank you, Erica. And Marie, how do you involve residents in decision making on high profile issues, and can you give an example?
Certainly. So early and often is the short answer. Community needs to be involved in high profile decisions and decisions at all levels early in the process. So an example that I would give is that we are adding on to our Health and Human Services building. We're adding onto it, and we're adding an adjacent structure to it. That is a huge capital investment and one that is meant to serve the community. So we led focus groups to hear from the community about what types of services that they wanted to see. So focus groups, surveys, I've had several, of course, open board meetings, and have specifically invited community members representing different types of community to be there, to present, to share their thoughts, and to speak on behalf of those that they represent. And so that's one example. Another example that's more policy facing is a few years ago when I was the chief health officer, and I was advocating for the Board of Supervisors to enact an ordinance for distracted driving, and so to prohibit cell phone use while driving. And that, of course, was a very, it was a highly debated topic. We had stakeholders that represented medical professionals who, of course, came out on the side of, having no phone use while driving. And then we had community members and some industry leaders, for example, realtors, some truck driving, business, who said, that's just not realistic. This is how we do our business often. We're on the road. We have to be able to communicate. And so we had several public forums, several stakeholder forums, several surveys. It really engaged the public, lots of one-on-one meetings, lots of small group meetings, to really learn what the best approach was and to be able to bring the decision makers solid options. And so the evidence certainly says that there shouldn't be any phone use while driving. But we also know that where we are in society, that wasn't practical. And so that afforded us the opportunity, and afforded me the opportunity, based on all the feedback that I received, to be able to provide the board with some real clear suggestions and guidance on what an acceptable policy and ordinance to adopt was. And in the end, that was successful. We did indeed adopt a policy that the majority of the community was very happy with.
Thank you, Marie. And Aretha, how do you involve residents in decision making on high profile issues, and can you provide us with an example?
Yes, in 2005, I was appointed as the Director of Neighborhood Action and Community Engagement for the District of Columbia by the mayor. The mayor had an initiative called the Citizen Summit. It was a quest that the mayor of DC had to engage residents of the district in the decision-making process. This summit was a one-day event that started with another number of community events. As the director, my job was not only to involve them in setting the priorities of the government, but also this became the part of our budget process, our strategic plan. So as the director, my job was to get as many citizens together for a setting to talk about what matters. Armed with a team of individuals who worked, we focused on bringing individuals from different races. We had translators. We had individuals representing vast array of parts of the community. As the Director of Neighborhood Action, it was the most exciting event. I had over 2,000 people at a one-day event talking about our government and what they wanted from the government. Citizen Summits work. It was a community town hall meeting that really set the scene for the future in government. And so my job there was to really understand and meeting with community members, or what are the priorities? We start to spin, and so that is a policy decision that led to our budget. And so part of it was meeting with the different wards and having ward-based meetings, meeting with different community groups and coming together and saying, here is the focus. The theme of that was lifting all communities. It's making sure that one group was not just being heard, but all groups were being heard. And so I believe that it is very important to communicate often and early, but also to communicate in different fashions. And so as we're facing COVID-19 issues, now we have to move to a different fashion. We're having this town hall meeting online. And so now we've got to do that even more and more, because people want to be engaged, but they also need us to help to understand what's happening. The key to succeeding when you're trying to push something forward is to make sure that you're giving individuals the facts and you're listening as much as you're talking. And so I believe strongly in community engagement and community involvement with the decision-making process in government. Thank you.
Thank you, Aretha. And now we've come to the point where each candidate will give a 1 to 2 minute closing statement, and it will be in this order. It'll be Aretha first, then Erica, then Marie.
Okay, good. Well, I am very, very excited. I'm very motivated. It was an honor for me to be part of this group. When I think of what I look at as our future, I describe myself often, and I describe even my community, driven by 3 Ps: passion, purpose, and perseverance. My passion, as defined, is something that you're enthusiastic about. I have a passion for local government. I have a passion for making a difference in my community. And that passion has spurred me to move to other organizations to make a difference, to be there. My purpose is to be a public servant. My purpose is to come into an organization, be part of the organization, have meaningful relationships with the organization, and also show people that we are here to serve them, to serve as a force for individuals who don't have a voice. We want to make sure that people are heard. Perseverance is the last and also very important. It really means doing something despite the difficulties. We're facing great difficulties today in local government. We're facing difficulties in our world, but we have to keep pushing on. As a city manager, I believe that it is our job, it is our calling. My calling to local government and my passion and commitment is that I want to serve as the next city manager for Evanston so that I can bring those talents and bring that commitment and passion to the residents of Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you, Aretha. Erica, you're next.
Thank you, Heidi. As a wrap up, I wanted to touch on how I feel that in the last year serving as the interim city manager, I've really proven myself in a time where it really mattered the most. Going into my tenure as the interim, I figured we would have some contentious community issues, some development issues. I never could have imagined that we would have a worldwide pandemic. And when it really came down to people's lives being on the line, I stepped up and I helped our team give a response to this pandemic that, in my opinion, was one of the best in the country. Of course, I had a lot of assistance from our mayor, our city council, our community partners. We had a task force that we assembled very early on but we wanted to make sure that our response was for the whole community and that everybody was involved, everybody was on the same page, and that as soon as we got information, we were able to share it with everybody. And sharing that information was crucial to saving lives. We have a lot of long-term care facilities in our community. We had to work with them early on to ensure that they had proper PPE. This was before the days when that was required. I'm sure that one of the best parts of this pandemic will be that it will be required for all long-term care facilities from now into eternity to have PPE on hand in case there is an infectious disease breakout. But through this pandemic, it's really shown myself, my team, the City Council and the residents a true measure of what it means to come together to fight and to come together to look towards a recovery that's equitable. So I've been very fortunate to have been in this position during this pandemic. I feel like it's been an opportunity for us to come together while we put our differences aside and look to what we can become in the future. So I appreciate the time tonight. I appreciate learning more about Aretha and Marie, and I look forward to going on to the next steps in this process, and I hope that I get to be the next city manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. And Marie?
Yes, thank you so much. And I will echo both Aretha and Erica and just thank you so much for being part of the process. And could not be even more interested in the position after hearing the level of questions from the community. It is clear that Evanston is a community that demands engagement, demands results, and wants to be part of the conversation. My background, my leadership in community engagement, whether it be on the COVID pandemic response, whether it be in alternatives to justice, health, or just any community engagement. I think my school engagement, being an elected member for the community college, also shows my dedication and how I, not just through a work lens, but through a personal lens, want to further community and family. And so I am really excited to lend my expertise and to be able to work with all of the individuals that are already at Evanston and live in Evanston. And so, and I've thought about in my personal opening statement, I didn't share much about myself, but I am married for 20 plus years. We have 2 adult sons, and really, really looking forward to getting back to the Midwest where our roots are, and, you know, excited about the opportunity and the similarities as well between community. It lends well to being successful and to building those quick community relationships that are very needed in this time of turmoil. We're going to be in for a tough year, and particularly as budgets continue, as we discussed earlier, there's going to be some tough times, but I believe that the people of Evanston are resilient, and I think that I have the skills to help move forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Marie. And that concludes our public forum. I want to thank all of the residents who are listening to this, and for all of the assistance that they provided with respect to the questions. And I want to thank the candidates for appearing tonight and putting themselves forward in this important process. So we thank all of you and wish you all a good evening.